Welcome to Journey with Lay podcast. We discuss leadership, culture, and how to take your business to new heights. Your host, Lay Wang, is an adventurer, motivational speaker, and executive coach. Join us each week to learn how you and your team can reach your highest aspirations. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, Lei Wan here, host of this show. This episode is brought to you by Journey with Lei, where I help business leaders create a culture of excitement, build highly engaged teams, and consistently perform at their peak. Start tapping into your powers of excitement and take your career and your business to new heights today. And before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Allison Levine for connecting me to another great guest speaker. Allison is a speaker, author, and the kind of leader who leads by lifting others up. Thank you, Allison. And now let's welcome today's special guest. He is Brant Menswar. Brant is a speaker, author, entrepreneur, and he is also a former rock star. Hi, Brant. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lei. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And a big, huge shout out to Allie for connecting us. She is amazing and I love her dearly.
Yeah, I know. People are going to find out I have so many guests on this show because of Allison. So thank you, Allison. Mm-hmm. And thank you, Brant, for being here today with us.
My pleasure.
So I only give a very brief introduction because I want to leave the most juicy part for you to tell us how was like you went from a rock star to entrepreneur, speaker, author, all kinds of things under your title. So just tell us, what's your journey? What's where you came from?
It's been a crazy journey. There's no question about that. I went to college to play baseball mostly and had planned on playing professionally, ended up getting hurt. And so I had to pivot and sort of find something else to do with my life. And it took quite a while before I sort of landed in a place that I feel like I am supposed to be. I spent a number of years sort of in sales and doing a variety of things, and worked in the commercial collections business for a number of years as the vice president of business development for the largest commercial collection agency in the world. And when I was about 30 years old, I had this sort of calling into music, right? So it's sort of a music ministry to start in a sense. And so I quit my job and started to pursue music at the ripe old age of 30, which in the music world, you're already a dinosaur. And so for me, it was a strange start, but had a couple of songs sort of hit early on and had some decent airplay on the radio and formed a band in 2006 after many years as a solo artist, and signed our first record deal and did that for a couple of years, and then formed Big Kettle Drum shortly after that after we left that deal, and signed another record deal, and have toured for the better part of 15 or so years now. Just recently sort of retiring with Big Kettle Drum and transitioning to being a keynote speaker. And so that sort of happened because I had to get off the road. I was just, I didn't want to be 60 years old, traveling around playing 100 gigs a year. That did not excite me in any way, shape, or form. And so had a friend who had started a team building company called Banding People Together. That was phenomenal. Just help people collaborate using music and sort of musical techniques of writing songs and things to teach them the art of collaboration. And that sort of put me on the path of keynotes and started off sort of in the collaboration space and moved into purpose and values, and wrote my first book on change and dealing with change about 4 years ago called Rock and Roll With It. And then last year came out with my last book called Black Sheep, which is really about discovering your non-negotiable values, what I call your flock of 5 non-negotiable values. And it was right around that time that sort of things really picked up on the speaking side. I was named one of the top motivational speakers in the country, and that didn't hurt to have a lot of people sort of see me and for the first time perhaps and learn about what I speak on. And so it's been a bit of a whirlwind. And the pandemic happens and sort of throws everybody into a tornado of sorts. And coming out of it now with a new app, a book discovery app called BookyCall that I've been working diligently on with my business partner Jim Knight for the better part of 6 or 7 months now, and it's been a crazy ride, and thankful to be here today with you for sure.
Thank you. Wow. I definitely think that's a really crazy, wild ride. You lived so many lives that people will never even live just half of that in all their lifetime. So you transitioned from athletes to corporates, then to music and speaking, writing, then entrepreneur. So I wonder, most people have anxiety, fear whenever they, this end, what's next? Then make a transition. So I wonder, have you ever been through anxious, stress out, fear before you step into the next role? How did you handle that?
For me, I think it's the curse of a creative. So if you are creative by nature, like myself, then you're always looking for that next thing, right? What's that next opportunity to create? And so for me, it went from playing baseball and I was a pitcher. So it was about sort of creating the experience that I want, the pitches that I wanted to throw, and what I wanted to sort of have happen, being in control of what was being thrown on every pitch, to the corporate world and sort of creating the environment that I wanted people to feel inspired in, and that sort of transitioned into the music side as well. So it's never really been fear per se. I think when you have a salacious need for creativity, the fear sort of subsides a lot because you are so busy creating, you don't have time to worry about anything else.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you have so many talents. However, many people, when we talk about what are you most excited about in your life, in your career, what do you really want to do in your life, in your career? Oftentimes we'll hear people say, I don't know. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what I'll be excited about. So I wonder, did you always know that you have the talent in sports, music, or any of those things? Or you just okay, what's next? How did you discover your next talent and decide that's the next passion you're going to pursue?
It's a good question. I think for most of my life, if I've been interested in something and have felt the need to succeed or learn more within that area, I've done fairly well. And it sounds sort of awful in a sense that at times I wish that I was only good at one thing, because it certainly makes choosing what you're good at much easier. But when you have a sort of a wide variety of areas that you enjoy working in and you can excel in, it's actually hard at times to find the lane that you should be in when you have found success in multiple lanes. It can be a distraction for really reaching the true success that you might be destined for if you are in a lane that you shouldn't be because you're good at it. Just because you're good at it doesn't mean you should be doing it. And it doesn't mean that you enjoy doing it. There have been lots of things that jobs I've had that I might have been really on paper good at, but man, did I hate performing those jobs on a daily basis. And so for me, what I've learned over the years is, when you discover what these non-negotiable values are that you possess in your life, what you realize is what you do as a profession doesn't really matter as long as it feeds those values. And so I think for me, having so many different sort of pursuits of music and corporate and sports and now tech and app development, all those sorts of things. It's really in service of honoring those values. And so I don't think it's necessary to say, this is where I'm destined or this is what I want to do. The goal should be to honor those values, or as I say, is to feed those sheep, right? We all have these flock of 5 black sheep values is what my book is about. And I encourage people to be feeding their sheep on a daily basis. And if they don't feed their sheep every single day, then they can get lost. And that's when we get lost. And so for most of us, if we can identify what these are and be really deliberate with our intention of making sure we're honoring those values, what you do for a living doesn't really matter, because you still come to at the end of each day with a sense of fulfillment.
Yeah, I get it. People are going to say they're jealous of you have so many talents, and also you can figure out what to focus. So if for people who are lucky to have multiple talents and interests, so how do they identify what's the core value, your black sheep value to focus on?
There's a couple of ways. It depends on your comfortableness with vulnerability as to the path that you might choose. So of the more traditional nature would be a deep dive into your past, either on your own or perhaps in therapy of some sort, of really looking at what Maslow would call peak experiences in your life and how these peak experiences have influenced you. What the sort of science has shown us on the behavior side over the years is that our core values are pretty much formed and well set by the time we're in our early 20s. And outside of a catastrophic event in your life, they rarely change. But I think a lot of us feel like our values change as we get older. That actually isn't the case. What I believe is happening is you are becoming more aware of what your real values are, because a lot of times we get distracted with really important things in our lives, but they're not non-negotiables. And so as we get older and we live enough life and we have enough experience, we start to realize that something that we might have thought was one of these really deeply held personal core values is just something that we deem really important in our lives, but indeed is not a non-negotiable value. And so, for me, if you don't want to go through the deep dive and discover sort of over the course of your life why these things have happened, we created an online assessment to sort of get you started, a shallow dive into the values pool, if you will. And what the assessment does online, it's a free assessment that anybody can go to at findyourblacksheep.com. It helps you sort of narrow down things that you are telling yourself are really important. So it presents you with about 125 commonly held core values. And it asks you sort of in a knee-jerk reaction, go ahead and select any word that really resonates with you. And what we know now, over the last year or so of people taking, about 10,000 people have taken this assessment, we know that the average person selects at least 30 values that they tell themselves are really, really important. And why that matters is when you tell yourself there are 30 things that you are sort of longing to honor on a regular basis, you are sort of setting yourself up for failure. It's not possible to honor that many things in your life on a daily basis. And so we try to take those 30, 40, 50 things, however many you said were really important to you, and we categorize them by likeness. So things like sympathy and empathy go in one bucket, and things like achievement and success go in another bucket. And before you know it, all the words that you selected are sort of neatly organized into 5 different areas. And then you get to pick what's the one value from each area that you can't live without. It's that one non-negotiable. And so that gets you to what your initial flock of 5 black sheep values are. The reason that we call them black sheep values is because a black sheep's wool cannot be dyed. So every black sheep that you have ever seen is 100% authentically original. It cannot be transformed or made into something that it wasn't meant to be. And so similar to that, these are the values that we're looking for, that no matter how much someone wants to try to influence you or change your mind, these are values that will not be moved because they are at the very core of who you are.
So would you mind give an example of what are your 5 core black sheep values?
Sure. So I have 6. I will tell you straight up. As a rock star, we do everything to excess. So I needed an extra. But for me, creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, authenticity. Those are my 6. So every decision I make in my life gets filtered through those 6 things, and I either honor those things or I violate those things. So saying yes or no becomes very simple, and in the process, things that I used to feel guilty about for saying no to, there is no guilt, because I can look and go, well, it actually violates this value. And so that's why I can't say yes to that. And there's no discussion needed. It either gives me an opportunity to honor the things that matter most to me, or it gives me an opportunity to step on one of the things that matters most to me. And so, I've tried to live my life that way for the last few years. And since I've been doing that and sort of programming these values into my daily life, my life has transformed. I went from speaking 20 or 30 times a year to 70 plus times a year. My speaking fee tripled. All of these accolades come in, and the only thing I'm doing different is living with deliberate intention. I am choosing when and where I want these 5 values, 6 values for me to appear in my life on a daily basis.
I know you're such an overachiever, so you have 6 core values. So I wonder, are there ever the time that you have to prioritize one or the other? So the 6, do they have to go like in terms of order 1, 2, 3, 7, 6, or if like can be jumped around like other time there's conflict, you have to emphasize one, give up the other one?
You're asking all the right questions, right? And so the idea here is that people need to understand that values live in a hierarchy. And so even though I have 6 non-negotiable values, those non-negotiable values still exist in a hierarchy of importance for me in my life. And so what that means is that if I had an opportunity to fulfill 5 of my 6 values by doing something, but that one most important value was violated, the answer is still no. And it's because it's the most important of the values to me that supersedes my opportunity to honor all the rest. And so, for me, the reason that we try to get it to 5 or 6, sometimes it's 4, is because these are values that appear organically in your life on a daily basis, whether you want them to or not. And so the idea here is to be really deliberate with your intention to honor those things. We want to sort of make sure that all of these values, all of these black sheep get fed on a daily basis. I'll have people that have sort of been through my training come to me early on and say, "Hey, Brant, I had a great day. I fed 4 of my 5 sheep today." And my response is always, "God, what an awful day." And they're looking at it as they were, 4 out of 5 is a great percentage. That's a great day. But my sort of response to that is, if you got to the end of the day and you said, "Hey, Brant, I had a great day today. I fed 4 of my 5 kids." Is it really a great day? No, it is not. And it's the same with this. All of these values have to be fed on a daily basis. That doesn't mean they all get the same amount of food. Some days there are certain values that get to gorge, and other days they get table scraps, but they always get a little something to eat on a daily basis. And that's what keeps them close to us, right? One of the interesting stories that I discovered in research for writing Black Sheep was that sheep recognize the voice of their shepherd. And I was a little blown away. And to be quite honest with you, just didn't believe it when I first was told about this. But the truth is that sheep recognize the voice of the person that feeds them. That's the truth. And why that's important is because if you think of our values in the same way, the idea is to have them close to us all the time so that when we are in desperate need of them, we don't have to go searching for them. They're right there. They're right there to help us through these most difficult moments. And so if you are constantly feeding your sheep, they will recognize your voice and they will come running when you need them. But if you if you don't feed these sheep on a regular basis, the chances of them recognizing your voice becomes less. And it may take a little bit before you find them when you need them. And if you're like me, there is no time to spare. Time is a luxury, and we need things in a moment's notice to be able to make the best decisions we can for our life. And if we have to go searching for these things, it really puts a kink in being able to be efficient and make the best decisions possible. So for me, I want to make sure you feed those sheep every single day so they are right there and ready for you when you need them.
So you're saying that every day we need to feed all the 5 or 6 core values you identify.
Every single day with deliberate intention. For myself, the way that I make sure that happens is I program them into my calendar. So if you actually looked at my calendar and you looked at all the appointments I had today, you wouldn't just see who I'm meeting with and the time. You would see that information. And beside that, you would see more than likely 2 or 3 of my values of those black sheep written in to my appointment time, because those are things that I am going to speak into existence during that meeting. So when you were to look at this, you would have seen a couple of things from myself. I really care about 3 things for us in our time together today. One is creativity. I want to make sure that I'm creative in both the opportunity to answer these questions, but in how we present them, in the metaphors that we use to get people to understand. The second thing is really impact for me. I want to make sure that this has the right sort of impact on your audience and all of your listeners and fans that come to you regularly for advice. And then finally, it's about hope. And so my job today is to make sure when this is finished and people are done listening to it, they walk away with hope. And if they don't, that's my fault, because I have the ability to speak that hope into existence with you right now. And so that's what I'm really focused on. So it's that level of deliberate intention that you have to have on a daily basis if you want to make sure you feed all your sheep every day.
Wow, I love that. So I need to improve my calendar scheduling techniques to include more information other than just the event, who, what. It's also like why, what's the intention, what is the value we're trying to.
If you're a control freak like me, you would love it, right? You would love that because you're going into these conversations with a plan. Right. And you're not waiting for the perfect moment to come up that hopefully you'll be able to experience one of these values. If I left my life up to luck or chance or accident, I don't want to bet the success of my career on those things. So I have to take control. I have to choose what I speak into existence on a daily basis.
I love that. And I know the creativity is your highest value. And so I really think people are going to be curious about your new app, BookyCall, because that is totally embody your creativity. So tell us, what is that app and how did you come up with that idea?
When I released Black Sheep last year, I hired it was published by Page 2 Publishing out of Vancouver, who are just a phenomenal group of people who do an incredible job. Jesse and Trina are the principals there, and I love them both dearly. They are an author's dream from a publishing standpoint. One of the things that you might not realize when you are an author is that sort of the promotion of the book falls on the responsibility of the author most of the time. Yeah. And so I had to go out and find a way to promote. And so I hired this book publicist and paid them gobs of money to promote my book, and just had a horrible experience, right? I got next to nothing for I could have bought a car for what I spent on publicity for the book. That just didn't work. And so I ended up having to sort of take control over things. And when that happened, I found myself with about a month to go before the launch of the book. And so I started to go back to the things that we would do in the music business whenever we wanted to promote an album. And I started to use some of those same tactics and strategy to see if it would work in releasing a book. And some of them did, some of them didn't. But we sort of took what we could control and expanded on that. And I went to my business partner, Jim Knight, and said, look, I think there's an opportunity for affordable book promotion for authors. And we should probably look at being able to provide that from all the things that I just had to go through in this sort of bad experience that I had. Black Sheep came out and was a bestseller, and we've sold thousands and thousands of copies of the book now, which is fantastic. In a pandemic, we're pretty pleased with it. We're going into our second printing, and that was one thing. But we still sort of are at the mercy of the Amazons of the world and the people who sort of control the retail side. And how are you going to reach a targeted audience? The book business is sort of old school in a lot of ways, right? They're sort of ignoring how people choose to connect in today's sort of digital world, and knowing that through my work with values, that the number one shared values of all humans is connection, by like a 50% margin to the next closest value. And so what we did was we said, you know what? I had this crazy idea to have an app that worked like a dating app, but instead of matching people with people, let's match people with books. And so they would set up a profile. They'd say, here are the types of things that I like and what I'm looking for, just like they would in a real dating app. But rather than try to find them their perfect mate for life, we would simply have our writers craft a really creative book review in the form of a dating profile. And we would present these things to the person looking to be matched. And so we have 9 questions that we ask every book, if you will. And those 9 questions came directly from actual dating apps. And so we ask things like, who should swipe right on me? What are my best assets? What is my favorite inspirational quote? What's my best one-liner? What's the dorkiest thing about me? Where would we go eat or drink on our first date? So all of the same things that you would normally answer or read as an answer on an actual dating app, we reveal the book through the answers to these questions. And it has been an absolute just skyrocket success. We launched just a couple of months ago. We just crossed 125,000 users in 205 countries and territories. And we're holding on with white knuckles right now, trying to make sure we provide the experience that we want all of the readers to have when they use the app.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and a lot of people are working on a new app, creative ideas. So I think one of the questions many entrepreneurs face at the beginning, how did you get the first batch of pilot testing clients? Who will be the first, give you the feedback, help you to develop the product?
So I think it goes even before that, right? So having sort of a test audience and people to sort of try out your ideas and make sure they like them or not. The first thing you have to do is make sure that there's space for this in the market that you want to be in. And so we did a whole bunch of research and paid for some research to be done. And, Goodreads is sort of the gorilla in the space of book reviews, right? It doesn't hurt that they're owned by Amazon. So that alone sort of puts them in a pretty comfortable driver's seat in this market. And so what we discovered in our research, we did a poll of over 1,100 adults who are active readers and Goodreads users. And what we found was that 93% of them were unhappy with Goodreads. They were unhappy with the user interface. They felt like it hadn't been updated in 10 years. They were frustrated at the review bombing that would happen for authors who get held hostage for a good review by someone. And if they don't, they get bombed with like 1,000 one-star reviews through some bot somewhere in another country. They were very frustrated. So both authors' experiences and readers' experiences, there's a lot of room for improvement. And so when we heard that 93% were unsatisfied and they have 120 million users, we felt like there's space in the market for an app like this that's completely different, right? We don't give people the opportunity to tell us if they like the book or not, because that's not what this is about. What we are trying to do is present the book in a light and connect with a emotional connection, rather than read the back of the book and think that you might like what the publisher wrote, or you might read something from someone that read the book that you don't know. You have no idea what their tastes are, or the discernment of whether a book is good or bad. So this is a chance for you to make your own decision based on this emotional connection, because we treat the books like people and we allow them to answer questions like you would ask a person. And when you do that, it just connects with you in a different way than blindly reading a review from someone you don't know, or going into a bookstore and spending 3 hours reading the back covers.
So you find your beta testing clients through the marketing research based on the Goodreads?
We did some of that, yes. So we had those sort of early testers. We had sort of friends and family in that first batch. We went after some people who we knew were avid readers. So our target market, if we're looking at who we really want to approach, we really want to reach people who read a book a week. And that seems like a lot to some of us. And for others, it's actually right sort of in the sweet spot. It's in the middle. These are people who read 40, 50 books a year. There are some people who read 70, 80, 90 books a year, 100 books a year. They're just voracious readers. And so for us, sort of hitting that person who we know reads 40 or 50 books, they're going to buy a book a week, roughly. That was the market that we wanted to try to go after. And so we started to look at different age groups, different interests. And, one of the things that was really important for us is that people felt represented by the books in our library. We have a very curated library of what we accept. And it's not really content based so much as it's quality based, right? If you're self-published, that book has to have been edited. It has to meet the standards that something from Penguin Random House or HarperCollins, any of these other larger publishers, it's got to meet the same quality standards if it's going to be in the library. And so for us, making sure we had representation of age, race, sexual orientation, interests, all of those sorts of things. We wanted to make sure we had books in our library so that people feel represented both as a reader and as a writer. And so we went out and found a bunch of people in all of those different areas and made sure they felt like we were on the right track. And it's sort of it's a living library. We add books to the library every day. There's only going to be say 5,000 or 5 to 10,000 books in the library at any given time. These are sort of active library for 6 months, because after 6 months, there's so many new books that get released on a daily basis. Amazon gets something like 7,000 books uploaded a day. And so when you want an algorithm to sort of find the right book for you, and there are 8 million books to choose from, like there are on Amazon, it makes it really tough for the algorithm to be smart enough to give you what you want. When there are 5 or 10,000 books as an author, the chance of my book being matched to somebody looking for a book like it is like 100,000% greater than it would be on Amazon, because there's not so many books to have to sort of battle through to get any sort of recognition whatsoever.
Wow, that's a lot of creativity behind it. And I know, this is for anyone who didn't know that, go to download the BookyCall app to test it out, to see how captivating, engaging that app is. And I know the design is very simple. I almost feel like an Apple, very simple, but behind it, there's a lot of work, because I know the creativity, design, and the book writing, curating, a lot of things. So would you mind to share with us, as any entrepreneur starting a new business, you have to manage your costs. So how do you decide what you're going to develop in-house? What kind of team is your core team? And then something you're going to have to outsource to control your costs. So how do you decide, how do you start the structure?
Well, I think it's a part of it is what your what your network is, right? How strong is your network and how diverse is your network, both from sort of a skill set standpoint beyond our traditional definition of what diversity might look like. You have to have diversity of thought, especially in a startup. And so for us, the things that we sort of kept in-house were the things that we weren't willing to make mistakes on. These are sort of the most important things that are going to define the experience. And we want to make sure that we have total control as much as possible anyways over those things. When we got into areas of which we did not have expertise, we're not app developers, right? I don't know the language that this app happened to be coded in. So we had to go out and find developers, and we did. We found a crew of developers that were great. Envy Labs out of Orlando, Florida, just have a great relationship with them, so that we could speak to them in our language, and they could convert it to code and what that might mean, because we don't speak their language when it comes to those things. And so the ability to communicate in everyday language so that there is clarity of expectation, I think is paramount when you are starting something new. If there is any subjectivity in what you are trying to accomplish, it's going to come back and bite you in the ass every single time. It is going to. So you have to have that clarity of expectation. And for us, we sort of went out, and so we contracted all of the technical programming of the app. But we were very clear with what we wanted this app to look like. So you can't have an app called Booky Call and have it look low rent, right? It can't be kitschy. It wouldn't connect like we wanted it to. It had to have an elevated look and feel and experience when you're using the app to offset the irreverence of a name like Booky Call. We call it that because Wednesday nights and Saturday nights, for every person who registers for the app, at about 11 o'clock at night, you get a Booky Call sent to your phone, and it says, "Hey baby, you up?" What a question mark. And then it gives you 3 books that it is suggesting you might want to book up with, right? And so we are playing on that kitschiness and that sort of behavior that happens in real dating apps. And so we knew that the look and feel of the app had to be at a much higher level than maybe something that is just about function, right? This had to be as much about form as it was about function for us. And so we sort of came into it and said, this has to feel like a 1920s speakeasy, from the font choices to the color choices. Everything has to feel really high end. And so, and exclusive in a lot of ways. And they happened to catch Envy Labs really were able to capture that vision from the very first sort of meeting with their art team, which is, I will tell you, is completely rare. That never happens. Normally they come to you with something that looks nothing like what you asked for. But in this case, they really got it. And so when you have people who understand and capture that vision along next to you, they can bring that idea in your head and make it come to life. Those are the ones you want to really stick with. And even though it might cost us more to contract that out rather than have somebody in-house, it's worth the extra money, especially early on, to make sure that you have the product that you feel is going to resonate with your user base. And so that's what it's been for us, is making sure that that user experience feels amazing. And we are continually tweaking it. So we are on the hunt now for a full stack developer in-house to make some of the tweaks that we are learning as more people use the app. So, when we had 30 people using the app and giving us feedback, that's different than 125,000 people using the app and giving us feedback and feedback from different countries and different expectations. And so we need somebody in-house now to be able to make adjustments faster and on little things, right? On the text that we use, on the verbiage that the overlay screens have. When you get down to that level, these are things that you don't want to wait to change, but every time you change, you have to resubmit it to the App Store or Google Play, because it's available on both Android and Apple. And you have to sort of have all of that stuff prepared because it can take days or up to a week or two before they have a chance to review it and approve it and release the update. So for us, it's a bunch of identifying a whole bunch of things that need to be changed, doing them all at once, and then doing an update rather than updating every 2 days, every 3 days with every little change that we make to the app. And these are all things that if you would have asked me these questions 6 months ago, I would have had no idea. So we've had to sort of live through it and learn from both the process of how these things happen and also just the constant mistakes that are made when you don't know what you're doing, and learning from them each time and getting a little bit better every time you go to the next one.
Wow, thank you for sharing all those. And also, I know a lot of people, like from when they transition from a product maker who had a creative idea of how to make things work to leading a business as a leader is a totally different challenge. So I wonder, like, what kind of challenge did you face in, I don't know, you have a juggling between the two sides now, or how do you manage the two sides?
I will tell you that your level of self-awareness is literally what will make or break you early on. You can't come in and think you're going to be a superhero. You're putting too much pressure on one person, and if that's you, it's not sustainable. You have to have the self-awareness to know where you have some superpowers, and you have to bring in people in other areas that you do not have superpowers. So for me, I've been really blessed with a fantastic team of partners, right? So even though I might be the creative juice behind the look and feel and that overall experience that is up here that I want translated, I've got an incredible team. We've got Dr. Keisha Horner, who is our creative content officer. She sort of handles and makes sure that the quality of what we have stays up here. She is a doctorate in communication and 27 years of higher ed experience. So she's very structured in how she works, which I am not. So it makes it really important for me to have somebody like that to keep me on task and make sure that I'm not going off doing some crazy creative thing and ignoring what has to happen so that this app functions at the level that we want it to for every user who logs in. Nicole Talbot is our creative content director. So she's with all of the writers. We have a writing staff now of 16 or so writers who write profiles every single day for more books that get added to our library. So she's sort of helping with that, helping with some of the social media outreach. And we're getting a lot of reshares now by famous authors who see their book in the app, and now they share it with their fans. And so she's been just absolutely paramount of driving that so that we end up with sort of organic growth and not paid growth, which is great. Colleen Bowman sort of is our office manager that keeps everything going. She also runs the sales side of things for us with authors and publishers who are there. And then my business partner, Jim Knight, who sort of came from the training and development side of Hard Rock for 21 years. And so, everybody brings their superpower to the table, and it makes us, the super friends, right? It's the Hall of Justice. It's a chance for everybody to be in their lane and be fantastic at what they do. And everybody recognizing that we can't all do everything. We all have our specialties in which we are really good at. And our job is to try to work together to the best of our abilities so that together we create something better than any one of us could create alone.
Nice. And I know this question normally is for bigger corporation, like because this is a podcast about leadership, and I'm always interested about to see how other businesses are doing with their leadership development and team engagement. So does that apply to a small business, like a small, still in the developing stage business like yours?
Oh, I would argue it's more important in a smaller organization, right? So, the truth is, if you have a small company with a great idea and you want to scale that idea at any level whatsoever, your ability to have great leaders and sort of create great leaders, at least give them an opportunity to step into that role early on, really determines how fast you're able to grow. So for us, knowing that, we weren't quite expecting the quickness that we've been adopted outside of the United States. So we sort of thought we'd have obviously some strong followers and people who would adopt sort of what we're doing in the US. But to be honest with you, the US isn't even in the top 15 countries of users for us right now. So when you've got users halfway across the globe, it changes direction quickly, and it makes us have to pivot from fulfillment and where someone buys the book and can they get a book locally. No one's going to pay to have a book shipped from here to Pakistan and pay $65 for shipping on a $9 book, right? So it creates some logistical challenges when growth happens beyond maybe what you had initially projected. And so the need for great leadership in that moment has been paramount for us to be able to sustain and not make decisions that would tank our ability to grow. And so for me personally, I know where my strengths are and I know where my weaknesses are. And so I've always sort of reached up to people who have been more successful than myself. And so with the guidance of, people like Kathleen Wood, who has helped us sort of from the very beginning understand what it's like to have a startup. And if you're going to go after funding and you're going to go after some other things, here are the things that are really important and matter. And what does a full P&L look like that you're going to have? And what does your prospectus look like in your business plan? And you have to start thinking all these things through before the app even exists. Without that help, it would have made it really difficult. But because I have access to people like that, it is limited the number of really bad decisions I could have made over the last few months.
And so are your team like scattered all across the globe, or are they local? Like, how do you keep the team like interaction close, engaged in this kind of dynamic virtual world?
Yeah. Yes. And right. So we have, we're based our offices are in Winter Park, Florida, which is just outside of Orlando. And so our core staff, if you will, our sort of management staff are all local. And so I believe that's really important. It's not always necessarily important depending on your business and industry and what you do. But in a startup with something that has never been done before, and you have to pivot things really quickly on a regular basis, it helps. It at least helps to have the people in the room. If everyone was trying to coordinate across time zone and wherever they might be, and depending on your internet access and weather and everything else that happens, it makes it really difficult to make decisions quickly. So for us, we were really sort of deliberate with hiring people who were local and had that expertise that we were looking for. Our writers are all over the planet. So we've got writers from here to overseas and back. And that is because we want that diversity of voice, right? So when someone is writing these profile reviews, if it was all written or edited by one person, they have a tendency to sound the same, just like an album would sound the same if it was, produced by the same producer every time. So the idea here is to have that diversity of voice and thought, so that the profiles feel different as you swipe from one to the next.
Right. So what's the biggest challenge you are facing today?
It's scaling at speed, right? So it's one thing when you've got 1,000 books in the library. It's another thing when you have 5,000 books in the library, right? So 5,000 books in the library are going to require at least 3 times the writers that we have now working full-time, producing daily the number of books that have to be placed into this library. So as we continue our partnerships with publishers, you've got publishers like HarperCollins that puts out over 10,000 books a year by themselves, right? And so when you partner with the larger publishers, then the opportunity to scale quickly is there, which is great, but you have to be able to meet that with quality of writing and what we put into the library. We just signed a partnership with the Independent Book Publishers Association next year for all of 2020. And we are incredibly excited to be able to sort of shine the light on independently published books, and give them a discount for being in the library and being a member of that association. But there are 3,900 or so members. So there's 3,900 potential clients of ours that we have to provide the same level of service, whether you put out one book a year or you put out 10,000 books a year. So the ability to scale and keep the quality of service and product where it needs to be is the number one challenge for sure.
Wow. Well, sort of time is running short. Otherwise, I just want to keep on going and going. I still have so many questions on the dig your brain.
Part two. We'll do a part two sometime.
Yeah, we definitely need a part two because there's too many more stories we need to hear about BookyCall. So now it's a holiday time. So I just wonder, what are the top 3 books you are reading or you are recommending?
So, the interesting thing for myself is I get to see every single day through the metrics of the app what the most popular books actually are, both historically since the app is launched and every 24 hours. So why don't I, to make this even easier, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up and I'm going to share with you. So since we've started, I'll tell you the top 3 books in our library. The first is Big Girl, Small Town is the number 1 book out of all the books in our library. Dune is number 2, which obviously was supported by the release of the movie, which doesn't hurt. And 3 is A Calling for Charlie Barnes. And so those are the top 3 books in any genre across the BookyCall app right now. And in the last 24 hours or so, we had Codename Disavowed is number 1. We had The Family, number 2. And number 3 was Atlas of the Heart, which is Brene Brown's latest. And so those are sort of the peek behind the curtain, if you will, as to what's really trending right now in the book world, at least with our readers, who are just phenomenal people who really love the creativity and an opportunity to find a book in a different way than they've ever found before. And so for us, we are incredibly thankful for that user base and their trust in us to be able to produce compelling profiles enough for them to want to purchase these books.
Wow. I definitely need to check out your BookyCall and find out more books to read.
100%. Yes, you do.
Yeah. Thank you, Brant. Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing so many valuable insights and advice. So I wish you a happy holiday. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you learned something. And I'm curious about what's your takeaway and what's the most valuable lesson for you. And wish everyone a happy holiday and see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Journey with Lay. What's your most valuable takeaway from today's episode? What is one step that you are inspired to take? Start tapping into your power of excitement and become the leader you are always meant to be. If you dare to dream it, you can achieve it. Go to journeywithlay.com or email hello@journeywithlay.com. We'll see you again next week.